My name is Helen. I'm from the Department of Health Technology and Informatics. My real, let's say, how should I say? I couldn't call myself a radiographer anymore because I haven't done radiography for many years. And then, but indeed, I'm registered as a radiographer in Hong Kong. And then, basically, I do biomedical research. And then my research topics involve the process called autophagy. And then so it's very diverse. Like I say, sometimes I find myself have to split between, let's say, being a teacher, being a scientist, and then immunologist, and then an anatomist, many different ways. But then teaching, okay, teaching play a very important role in us because like we have in this university, let's say many of us have to teach at least 3 subjects per year. So it's a lot, a very high workload. And today, I'm really honored to be the facilitator for this afternoon session. And then we are very, very fortunate to have a big team from Hong Kong U. Okay, so this big team composed of 5 different, not just 5, but we have 5 presentations. And then we have actually discussed about the arrangement of this afternoon in order to have more time for the presentation and also a more integrated approach for the Q&A session. We decided to leave the Q&A session to the end, okay, to the last 15 minutes. And for the presentation order, we also find that like we don't really need any sequence to connect the story because every story is so amazing. So the first one that we have is Dr. Thomas Cecot. He's actually very interested in teaching and learning of human anatomy, and then he's going to talk to us about e-booklets. So let's welcome Dr. Cecot.
Hello everyone and welcome to this presentation. Right now I just like to go through my Southampton experience. I recently joined the team here at the Hong Kong University, but something what I would like to show in here right now is about my experience in Southampton. How we use the technology to improve students' learning. And in anatomy lab, we are having a lot of technology. We do have a microphone, we do have a camera, we do have a screen, and we have a teacher, the demonstrator, who can use this equipment just to share their stories. And students are here listening and watching this demonstration. This is the first case, very common in anatomy, the anatomy demonstration. The second case is something which is called the narrated lecture. Look, we decided to do something what was the online lecture, where the students actually can go through all of the topics whenever they want, however they want, and they can choose the different topics in the order they really want to do. The activity in this one here, it was they can stop, they can pause, they can rewind everything. But actually, something what was happening in the lab, it wasn't learning. Or maybe it was learning, but do we know if it was learning? And all of these cases we used as an example of technology-enhanced teaching. And this is my message for today. I would like to focus on the difference between the technology-enhanced teaching and the technology-enhanced learning. Our students look at the way how we teach anatomy, and actually these are the comments about the anatomy lab. You can actually see that there is a lot of people in the lab. There is a very fast pace. Sometimes it could be confusing. Of course, it's interesting, it's useful, it's helpful, but apparently there is a lot of problems we have to overcome. And we done something that a few years ago, it was 2014, this one here, but a few years ago, our perception, the perception of the students changed, totally changed. What we've done? So we haven't changed any content at all. We just had exactly the same content. We haven't changed the content, but we've changed the approach. We changed how we are dealing with technology in our lab. We changed the focus. It was the first thing. We decided to go from teaching in the anatomy lab to learning. We changed students' expectations in the anatomy lab. We decided that they're supposed not to be only the passive observers, but they're supposed to be the active explorers. And what we've done, the first thing what we've done, we decided not to do the video demonstrations in the anatomy lab. Why? In anatomy, we are quite lucky. We already do have some different teaching and learning materials. We do have the video atlas, we do have digitalized versions of the very, very good printed atlases. And we simply ask our students to use these resources in advance. We don't need to replicate something what already existed in our environment. We just said, guys, this is a really good thing, use this one here. So, the second thing we decided not to do anymore, we said, no, we're not doing these narrated lectures anymore. We said that instead of that, let's go to do electronic booklet, the e-booklet. And the e-booklet is the electronic guide. This is the collection of interactive tasks the students have to do. And what was really good about this e-booklet is that it forms the unique experience, tailored experience only for that lab. It means that we increase the value of the lab for the students because they can experience something only in the lab. They can't watch that on YouTube. They can't search in Wikipedia. They can't take it away. They have to go to the lab in order to experience something. Look at this picture. It changed a lot. The very first picture I showed you, it was the teacher in the center. In here, actually, the teacher is here. And you can see that the students are in the center in our lab. They had the original printed booklet, and we decided to change this printed booklet from a mini textbook, because in fact it was the mini textbook, into the collection of the tasks and activities. And these activities were complemented by some things available on our e-booklet. It means that the students had to go to the lab to fully experience and to do all of these interactivities. In the e-booklet we do have interactive diagrams, we have different quizzes, we do have the mini virtual patient. It's very important, especially for medical students, just to connect the real life scenarios. And we do have this lab task. And the lab task is something what you can do only in the lab and nowhere else. I don't know if you know this software which is called the Articulate Storyline. It's a great authoring software. It's very easy. It's as easy as making PowerPoint, but the output or the outcome is very, very interactive. PowerPoint may be perceived as something as teaching related, whereas the Articulate Storyline is something which creates the learning content. So we use this technology differently right now. We use the technology to support learning. And look what was happening. We haven't had these introductions at the very, very beginning of the anatomy lab because we were just collecting the information from the students, how they understand what is happening in the anatomy lab. We collected that, we analyzed that, and finally we could address the students' needs. It's flipping what is happening in the lab. Instead of us giving the students something what we think they need, we just analyze what their needs were and we address these needs. It means that we flip this content. What is quite funny, I'm using the word flipping, but I didn't know this word at that time. It's just happened like that. But right now it's called a flipped learning. So what are the results? We change engagements from individual appreciation of anatomical specimen into the collegiate participation. We changed the attendance of students. It's not very drastic, but it's the 1-year attendance, and it increased. We changed the attitudes of students. Sometimes the attitude is, teach me. I'm here a student, and you have to teach me. We changed this attitude into, I have to learn. Because we weren't providing them these demonstrations. In order not to waste the time, the students had to be prepared for the lab. They weren't spoon-fed anymore. And look what happened. Actually, this is the daily usage of our e-booklet for 2 weeks' time. This is the day when the students can access the e-booklet. And majority of them actually entered the e-booklet on the very, very first day. It means that the student started using the e-booklet. They inverted the learning and teaching process. We changed the value of the anatomy lab. As I said, it was the unique experience and unique opportunity in the lab. And as the experience, as you can see this experience, this is what is the student's perception, what they said. Content, exactly the same. Approach, different. What's about the performance? Unfortunately, I can't show you any data right now because we are still analyzing this data. But what I can see right now is that actual performance isn't better. So why is that? There could be different things why it's not better. One of the reasons could be because we also changed the type of questions and the focus of the question. Instead of asking about a lot of details, we're right now asking about the concepts, anatomical concepts. Maybe this is one of the reasons why it didn't change. So, as a summary, with the help of technology, by changing approach, we change the students' attitudes. What we've done, we just moved from technology-enhanced teaching towards the technology-enhanced learning. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, Tom. It's amazing, like say, the experience of the students, right? That's just valuable. So our next speaker is Dr. L.K. Chen. Dr. Chen has a very special title in Hong Kong as the Dean of Pedagogy. Yeah.
No. I was the assistant dean in teaching and learning, but I am not anymore for the past 2 years.
Oh, okay. So the website has not been updated.
Oh, which website? I have to find out.
The LED project website.
Project LED projects. I will investigate and I will rectify that. And I apologize for my university for being not updating the information fast enough.
No, it's my fault. I did my homework last night trying to work out.
No, that's okay. Our titles change all the time.
Yeah, all the time, yeah. And then you're going to talk to us about the IPTPL?
Yes.
It's a combination of 2 terms, right?
That's right. It's a long name. I'm going to talk about it.
Yeah, so we look forward to it.
Thank you. Thank you. So this is a electronic platform that we have kind of created ourselves for running what we call the interprofessional team-based learning. Now, this is a very long name. You can consider it as using team-based learning to implement interprofessional education. Now, what is interprofessional education? The idea is to put students from different programs together so that they learn with, about, and from each other. And that particularly is important in the healthcare sciences. So graduates of medical program will have to, doctors, they will have to work with nurses, and they will have to work with physiotherapists, they will have to work with social workers. And if they don't know what others professionals know, it's very difficult for them to collaborate. So we know interprofessional education is good because it enhances patient outcomes and the overall healthcare system will be more efficient. But the best way of doing it is really still up in the air. What is the best way of facilitating interprofessional education? Different universities have different approaches. And at University of Hong Kong, the one single biggest problem is the size of the different cohorts in different programs. Every year we have 200 something medical students, 200 nursing students, plus a number of Chinese medicine students, pharmacy students, social work students. Even if you just put these students together, it's already over 500 students. Our solution is to use team-based learning. Now, what is it? But let me tell you the complexity of our problem, because within our faculty we have the 5 different programs that I just told you: medicine, nursing, pharmacy, Chinese medicine, and social work. In addition to these 5 different programs, we also would like to invite students from other professional programs like occupational therapy, physiotherapy, which we don't have in Hong Kong U, and therefore we invited these programs from PolyU to join hand with us to run this interprofessional team-based learning program. So we have students from 11 programs. We try to mix them together, and each year there are over 1,000 students in these 11 programs. What we did is we decided on 6 different areas which we think will provide a lot of opportunities for students from these programs to interact. And if you look at this relatively complicated chart, if you look at number 3, fracture, we decided that that is a topic which will give us a lot of interprofessional learning opportunity. So for fracture, we have students coming from, let me try this new spotlight. Okay. Now we have students coming from Hong Kong U Chinese Medicine. We have students coming from Hong Kong U Medicine. We have students coming from Hong Kong U Pharmacy. Plus, we have students coming from PolyU Nursing, PolyU Occupational Therapy, PolyU Physiotherapy, PolyU Radiology, and PolyU Social Work. Together, 448 students for that particular activity. And how do we mix them together? We mix them together into teams of about 6, and each team will have students coming from different programs. So for this particular activity, on fracture, so you have total number of students, we have 448. So if you have teams of 6, you have 75 teams. And within each team, you have a student from medicine, nursing, occupational therapy, physiotherapy, radiology, 1 from each of these 5 programs, plus another student from Chinese medicine, pharmacy, or social work. So each team will have how many? 6 different programs, students from 6 different programs. So we mix them together and put them through this team-based learning process, which is very structured. So before they come to the face-to-face session, we give them some material to study. The first thing when they come to the face-to-face session, they will have a test that they will have to tackle individually. And then immediately after that, they will start chatting with their new team members, and they will tackle the same questions now as a team. And then afterward, they have the opportunity to object to the teacher, if they disagree with the answer provided by the teacher. Followed by feedback from the teacher if the teacher feels that there are some areas that the students are particularly deficient in. And the final part is a team application exercises in which clinical scenario will be put up and students will be asked some questions that are designed to stimulate discussion between students from different disciplines. And how did we do that? Well, first of all, we need to have a space that is big enough for 400 people with a good Wi-Fi support, because we are going to ask all the students to use an electronic platform. And this is the electronic platform, the teacher's interface. For teachers, we can actually monitor the progress of every single student and their teams. We actually have results of how well, how bad they have performed. We have instant statistics. We can have we can receive the objection to the questions. And for the teachers, for the students' interface, of course it will have many different steps geared for different steps of the team-based learning. So for the individual test, it's all done online. The team formation, when the teams, different teams will have to tell the electronic platform, okay, I belong to team 3 and you belong to team 3. We are together belonging to team 3, so that the electronic system server will know that the students sitting around belong to the single and the same team. When they tackle the same set of questions using the electronic platform, that is of course particularly important. To facilitate the intermingling of the students from different disciplines, we also have an ice-breaking game in addition to the exercises on the electronic platform. One very different aspect of this team-based learning using this electronic platform is that the discussion within each team are happening without the individual teacher's supervision. So even with over 400 students for that particular face-to-face session on fracture, we have only 7 teachers there. And it is impossible and moreover unfair to the different teams if the teachers go to intervene, look into, or even help the discussion going on in some of these teams. So the teachers really have a hands-off situation in this kind of team-based learning. So all the discussions are happening without the teacher's intervention or supervision. When the students tackle the questions as a team, they receive instantaneous feedback as to whether they have chosen the correct or the right answer. They can also put in their appeals through the electronic system. And even in the final phase of the team-based learning, that is the application exercise, everything is also done on the electronic platform. But we also have an important face-to-face element when the students are choosing their answer. This is when students are raising a card with different color corresponding to the answer that they chose for each of the question in the application exercises. I am the person in the very back with the both hands raised, telling you that this is a very big venue. The most difficult part for teachers to do, and that part cannot be replaced by an electronic platform, unfortunately, is for the teacher to facilitate discussions. Now the teacher is here. He is trying to facilitate discussions among all the different teams. In this particular instructional unit, we have over 70 teams. So this is a very difficult task, and yet we haven't devised a good method for electronic platform to replace us. At the end of each session, the students within each team, they also have to evaluate each other. It's also done on the electronic platform. It's also done on the electronic platform. And at the end, they can see how their team members have evaluated his or her own performance. How did the student do? I mean, are we actually changing students' attitude towards working with students from other professionals? We use well-validated instruments like the Ripples Readiness or Interprofessional Learning Scale. The results are overwhelmingly positive. Students are definitely more ready after going through this IPTBL platform. And we use other instruments as well, like this attitude towards various aspects of team learning. Results also turn out to be highly positive. Students are definitely changing. But what I wanted to say is, with this electronic platform, we are engaging students, several hundreds of them, and which would have been very difficult without such an electronic platform, because the sheer number of students are just impossible to have pedagogies like problem-based learning, in which we would have needed how many? 70, 80 individual facilitators to run PBL sessions for such a large group. So it really helped us to run such a program. with demonstrated effects, impact on student learning, changing their attitude towards interprofessional collaboration and learning. So that's what I would like to share today. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Chen. Indeed, I see a lot of familiar faces because I saw some of the radiography students in the photos. Yeah, so it's amazing. So our next speaker is Dr. Julie Chen, also from Hong Kong U. Julie is a family medicine doctor, and then she is very interested in organizing the community of learning. So let's welcome Chen.
I think I'm not used to such highly efficient technology where all the batteries and everything work. So it's actually very nice to be here. So thank you. So I'm the third of our panel of 5, and as was mentioned very early on, we have a very diverse range of projects. And the one that I'm going to introduce is called Connected. It's a project that was actually funded by the UGC. We have a very large project team. It's cross-institutional, cross-disciplinary, involving 2 different universities. And the main idea about this project is found in its name. It's about connecting, and it's about connecting with education. And when I talk about connecting, I mean connecting people in different ways. You can connect with individuals, you can connect with ideas and concepts, you can connect over time and geographic distance. So it's all of these ideas of connectivity combining with all of these ideas of education. So thinking about education is not just knowledge, but education is about broadening one's horizons, about one's own intellectual capacity. So it's about connecting with education. So just by way of background, all of our universities here in Hong Kong, as well as around the world, is really looking at education as beyond the physical boundaries of the institution. And I think already there's a lot of encouragement for students to go beyond the classroom, to go into disciplinary attachments. So for example, medical students or health sciences or health professional students will go and have their clinical attachments in the community. You may have business students, engineering students, journalism students going off having internships into the community as well. But you'll also have students who are going off and doing volunteer work, service work, cultural or sports activities that are co-curricular. So again, general education or independent study type of work. And I think universities are also recognizing that this can actually be part of the informal curriculum. In Hong Kong U, we have the initiative called Horizons, where in 4 years' time, by 2020, the hope is that all students, by the time they graduate, will have one overseas experience and one experience in China. And for our faculty, the Faculty of Medicine, we've taken that one step further. So I think we've been rather bold in actually changing our curriculum. So our 6-year curriculum will have one full year, the year 3 year in the middle, where students will actually have a full academic year to do something of their own interest. So we call this the enrichment year. So it's actually a semi-structured year where they can't do necessarily anything. They have to do something of educational value within one of 3 categories. So it can be something to do with research, either bench-related research or clinical research. They can choose to do service or humanitarian work, or they can have academic exchange. So we have people who are going off to Bristol and they're working in a lab on mouse genes. We have people going to Cambodia who might be participating in service work, developing a health education project. We have people going to the World Bank doing an exchange with that institution. And we also have people staying in Hong Kong and perhaps taking up a minor in music. Because it's something they've always wanted to do. So this program is really about having the opportunity to either broaden or deepen your interest with the idea that whatever you do will be complementary to your future as a university graduate and as a doctor for medical students. And concurrently, our partner institution, the Education University of Hong Kong, will also be having students go off on their exchange, overseas field experience, to consolidate their teaching in the field, as well as other exchange programs. So they're having a more typical experience. But for both of these, we have a gap. So for both of these cohorts of students, so when we have students going away for a year, doing all of these different things, how do we actually keep them connected? How do we keep them linked to their peers and to the fact that they are still medical students when they're doing all of these different things? So how do they connect with their goals? How can they make connections beyond what they're doing individually in each of their individually chosen activities? And how can we maintain these connections over time? This is what we were trying to solve. And so for those of you who are visual learners, this is how we envision our enrichment year, this fertile plain of green, ready to be populated with whatever our students have in their imagination. And what we want to do is to connect them. We want to connect them with this with this railroad. And they will all board this train, and over the course of a year, the students will not only experience their own chosen area of interest, but they will also benefit from what other peers have been doing as well. And hopefully by the end, in summer 2019, everybody will be suitably enriched. So the goal then of our project is to connect, as I mentioned. So it's about connecting in all of the diverse ways that I mentioned with education in its broadest sense. So the goal of Connected, which is really a program, is to enhance and support the student learning experience in all of these domains via an electronic platform. We call it a virtual collaborative space, where they will form a community of learning that will coalesce with the assistance of a mentor. So there's sort of three essential components to this particular project. So I'll just briefly talk about each one. So the virtual collaborative space, or the e-platform, ideally will fulfill all of these criteria. So we did look in the literature, we consulted our students who will be doing this project, we consulted with experts who know a lot more about this than we do, to find out, what is it that will make people use this platform. And we also had a look at the advantages of various kinds of electronic social collaborative and work collaborative, as well as team collaborative and e-portfolio type spaces. So all of these have various advantages and disadvantages. And finally, after all of that, we decided not to reinvent the wheel. We decided to use an existing platform. This one we chose is called Workplace. It's actually by Facebook. And one of the reasons why we chose it is because it's very familiar. So a lot of the attributes of Facebook translate quite nicely to teamwork. And again, because it's familiar to people, it's not, there's really no learning curve. People seem to know how to use it relatively easily. And in fact, we're continuing to do some feasibility studies among our students who are not going on the enrichment year. This is one of our family medicine problem-based learning groups, where we've tried to incorporate the learning online. So they're actually having a conversation about a trigger point. So we're trying to work out some of the details on how the students will actually use this platform to conduct their learning. One of the advantages of Workplace is that it does allow the formation of small teams. And so all of our students, we have about 240-ish students who will be participating in this, will have a team. So we have 33 teams of about 6 to 8 students. And in that team, they will be working on some structured activities that they will draw on, that they will draw from their own individual enrichment year experience. They'll also be part of a big group, which is everybody, which we will use to send out information. And then for the mentors, they will have their own mentor group where we will share ideas, best practice, and likely commiserate. But basically, each team, as I said, has 6 to 8 students with a mentor. We have 6 teams that are actually mixed, so we have both medical students as well as education students. And we try to make the teams purposefully diverse. So not all students will be in one particular area of enrichment. So we'll have some students that are doing service, some that are doing research, some that are doing exchange somewhere, and sort of a relatively even allocation of male and female students as well. Okay, so this is really to be consistent with the spirit of the enrichment year, which is stepping out of your comfort zone. Okay, so what exactly are they going to do on this e-platform through the workplace? Well, they're going to try and build this community, because part of what we had said was we wanted students to feel connected. And how do you feel connected with other people is if you have something in common. And what do people have in common in this cohort? They're all going to be doctors or teachers, a professional, and they're all going to be university graduates. So the content of what they will do on the workplace is derived from the institutional aims. So the Hong Kong U institutional aims, the EDU generic institutional learning outcomes, as well as the roles of a doctor. When you look at those criteria, there's areas of overlap. So this idea of communication, this idea of being a humanist and having some sense of self-reflection and ethics, and then this idea of having some global citizenship. So there's these areas of overlap which we use as the foundation for structuring the learning on this platform. So the aim of the content is to develop these generic capabilities in our students. So as I said, we tried to derive what we call inquiry pods from these areas of overlap, and we've decided that we would do 3. And let me just give you a very quick example of what one might look like. So one of them is about being a communicator. So being a communicator, this is sort of our one-line summary of what the inquiry pod is all about. But each inquiry pod will have 4 distinct areas that they will inquire into. So the first one will be something concrete. So every topic that we have, the student will try and develop some sort of skill. They'll acquire some sort of concrete knowledge. And again, all of these will derive directly from what they're doing for their enrichment year. So for communication, for example, we'll ask them to make a video to share with the rest of their teammates exactly what they're doing. And in doing so, they will be able to use lay language to make what they're doing understandable to the other members of their group. And at the same time, hopefully they can make it compelling and interesting. So that's about the presentation skill as well as delivering content. The second area is something about concepts, so understanding creating concepts. So communication is an area that people have researched and there's textbooks written about it, but what we would rather them do is to take examples of communication that they have seen in their enrichment year activity and bring it back to the team, and from that construct a mutual communal understanding of that idea. The third area is something debatable. So this is to allow them to understand that there's different ways to perceive a particular idea. So for communication, we may give them a couple of videos that are both either good or both bad communication, and some of them might find one more appealing than the other. So there might be an area of discrepancy for them to discuss and debate. And then lastly, can we take this idea of communication back into their own experience? Can they step out of the box and do something that is a little bit brave for them? So it doesn't have to be anything sophisticated or dramatic. It can be as easy as introducing yourself to somebody new that they haven't met before, which might be, for some people, enough of a step out of their comfort zone. Okay, so every inquiry pod will have this kind of structure. And again, this is a skeleton, and what we will encourage our students to do is to actually suggest their own ideas. They don't necessarily need to follow our suggestions. If they actually have something more interesting that they would rather do, we would encourage them to do that in terms of, as long as it follows that same structure. Okay? And then finally, at the end of the year, we would like them to do this meta-reflection. So essentially, take what they've done in their enrichment year, as well as what they've done on this e-platform in the workplace, and collectively talk about how how they have evolved, I guess, from the beginning of the year. So in terms of their professional identity, so in the domains of being a communicator, of being a global citizen, and of being a reflective decision maker. Okay, and then we'll have certain rubrics that we will assess them on. And the last point is about the idea of the mentor. So we have our platform, we have the content that they will use using our inquiry pods. But I think the most important thing is really about having the mentors who will guide them in the learning, but also be there as role models and support in other ways. All right, so we've actually launched in June 2018, so just a couple of weeks ago we had our launch where our mentors, our 33 mentors, met their groups of 6 to 8. We played a few games to get used to the platform. They were introduced to the ideas that they will be doing on the platform, and then coming up in September we will actually start the formal activities. Students will do that for a year, we'll come back at May 2019, they'll do their presentations, we'll get the feedback, and then we'll have our ongoing study and evaluation results by then as well. And I'll look forward to presenting that on that occasion. Okay, so thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Chen. Our next speaker is Dr. Christopher C., also from the University of Hong Kong. He is currently the lecturer in the School of Medical Sciences. And then, according to the webpage, Chris is actually interested in the e-learning platform and also the game-based teaching. That's also your PhD project.
That's right, yes, absolutely right.
So let's welcome Dr. C.
Hi, good afternoon everyone. Now I'd like to build a little bit on the work that my colleagues have presented, but to go backwards to go forward, if you like. So this talk is going to be about digital crowdsourcing for active learning. And I'll talk a little bit about crowdsourcing in the framework, and I want to go quickly to the example of how we've managed to use this. Now, my colleagues have talked about a lot of the use of technology in active learning in terms of the teaching itself, the implementation, sometimes even the evaluation and how it goes forward. However, I hope I can convince you that technology can also be used in education in the pre-phase, not only in pilot testing, but also in design, and even in ideation, even in idea creation for your own learning, and that's what I'm going to talk about today. Now, the background of this is perhaps something that educators have experienced themselves. So a lot of what we do in terms of educational e-learning design tends to come from a rather top-down approach and have a rather an expert feel, with all of those expert problems of cultural barriers, language barriers and other issues. Now I'd like to ask the audience, is there anyone here who's designed an app they thought was great, but no one uses? No one brave enough? Thank you. I have, and it was a wonderful and powerful experience, because I think what it showed me is I'm now too old to understand what a 19-year-old student would expect from an app. And that to me is very, very important. I couldn't understand these very different things. And so how do you get around this problem? This is sort of the problem. At the same time, in terms of pedagogy, we're starting to see the influence and importance of peer involvement in education. Not only in terms of them being educators, them having this social congruence, they speak the same language, at the same level and similar levels to themselves, and they form communities of learning, but also that peers themselves, as teachers, when they act and when they contribute, also benefit. So where these two items intersect is where we find perhaps a solution, or one potential solution, which is crowdsourcing. So we can think of crowdsourcing as this sort of problem-solving approach that taps into the knowledge and creativity of groups. So the idea is that it's a distributed model, and taps into the intelligence of many different people. And actually, we're starting to see its use not only in education, but also in medical and public health research as well. In terms of how it looks in real life, it looks fairly simple. It looks a little bit like a research project, but with one or two specific features I'd like to highlight. We define the problem as always, and we'll pose a question for crowdsourcing. But once we get to the practicalities of crowdsourcing, getting that information from the hive mind, the population, there are two things which can be particularly advantageous. One of which is the use of digital platforms, and the other one is the idea of micro-contributions from the people who you're crowdsourcing for. And I'll talk about those individually in just a while. we also have to do some evaluation of the materials and synthesize it in both qualitative and quantitative forms. So this is the overall process. And what we're starting to see in the literature generally, it's particularly useful in topics, for example, which are sensitive topics, such as HIV and AIDS prevention. And this was an online platform for MSM population in China, and it was get significant contribution from crowdsourcing of that population in China. Similarly, sensitive topics, sexual education, both in schools as well as universities. And we're starting to see in science education, and even in things like exam question writing and generation, and I hope the teachers are sort of smiling at this stage, it's a lot of work for us, but we're starting to see crowdsourcing used in these scenarios too. So I'd like to talk about the two things I said I'd highlight, the digital platforms and micro-contributions. Let's look at how we could do digital crowdsourcing. I want to show you what we expect to get before I give you some example questions that we might pose. So for example, if we wanted to tap into the knowledge of populations, we could use social media platforms to pose these questions. One area that's often missed is the opportunity of online discussion forums, which is often underused, but they're rather popular, mass emails and other simpler technologies, and Google Forms as well. And of course the counterpart, the physical world counterpart of workshops and even public consultations are areas we can gain information. And what might we get from this? Well, I think there are two sides to the micro-contribution, the format and the content. And if we look over to the content, the kind of things we might be able to ask, particularly if we're designing an educational intervention, educational project, we might be able to address cultural and age gaps, choice of vocabulary, even things like the appearance of digital avatars, what might be an appropriate incentive or reward for your population, the type of interface, new features, and really anything that you care to pose to your potential consumers could be gotten. And to move it over to what's the format, I think it's rather important that we're not looking for, in a normal way, a focus group or a survey study where it's quite a burden on those who you're asking. Here, we could expect as little as a single word, which could still contribute value. Short paragraphs, essays. You do, of course, see these creative format songs, increasingly media formats of photographs, videos, drawings, and rarely physical items as well. But these are the kind of formats we could expect. Let's sort of try to boil this into an example, and this is sort of a very theoretical example. Say we wanted to design a weekly educational quiz, and we just wanted to find out what a social media platform would be ideal. Well, what we could do is look at the literature, and the literature says, okay, Facebook is very popular, it's been successful in other places, but it's 2018 and it's Hong Kong, so I'm not quite sure. So I might go online and ask this kind of question. And I may get, as step one, confirmation. It may be that the general consensus is Facebook or Instagram is the way to go for this kind of platform. However, we could get onto something like speculation. So it could be Snapchat that people are using nowadays, it could be WeChat specifically because of the language advantages, or it could be things we've not even particularly thought of, Pinterest, I don't know if anyone's using Vimeo, those kind of things. It could be for any sort of reasons, and therefore interesting to add on here the little sub-question of why. So we want to find out not only what do you think, but also why do you think that. So this is one example of how we can use crowdsourcing to influence our educational design. And again, a simple example, if we are designing videos for education, my specialism is teaching anatomy, so I might say to students, what videos are you watching for learning and why? And in this case, we might get slightly different information. For example, the first thing I'm really looking for is referral. Now in terms of referral, what I mean is what they are watching that may not be in the literature. I think at this point it's worth to mention, within educational literature, it is very important for us to look through and see what's being done. And however, the literature is a little bit slow in terms of getting the information to us that we need, and it's not always that current. And also, it doesn't cover everything. So in this area, this is what I call the non-literature review. So whilst we're doing our technological interventions and we are reading the academic papers, perhaps our target population can refer us to what they're actually using. And they may even do some form of qualitative analysis for us. If we're asking why, they may show us what are the particular qualities of the resource, the video that they like, and why do they like it, and to make suggestions as well. So these are the kind of examples we might see that you could use. I won't dwell too much on the theoretical framework in the original form, which actually comes from the sort of business and information management industry, but this is just to show the idea if you have, if you want to manage information or you have an ideation problem in the sense that you want to come up with a new idea, What I'd like to focus on more, however, is how crowdsourcing articulates with frameworks, theoretical frameworks, we might be a bit more familiar with. For example, most educational interventions may be considered a complex intervention, and therefore we might use something like the UK's Medical Research Council Complex Intervention Evaluation Framework. And within this framework, we see at the very early stage and throughout this idea of the stakeholder contribution and the ongoing stakeholder interviews and contribution throughout any evaluation framework. And really this is what crowdsourcing represents. It articulates very well with other theoretical frameworks by getting the contributions of the target population in a disseminated way, so rather than having a very specific focus group. And it's on this content that I'd like to compare a digital crowdsourcing with procedures that you perhaps might go through in the own design of your own interventions. Lots of you will have done focus group evaluations of your interventional, your educational technology, I'm sure. But some of the key differences, I think the first one, the clue's in the name, focus groups, very concentrated. So we tend to get this very concentrated opinion, whereas in crowdsourcing, we are allowed a much more distributed sort of set of sampling. In focus groups, we tend to ask our participants to focus on providing feedback. What would you like to change? What did you like about our app? What didn't you like? With crowdsourcing, in addition to that, what we can do is get ideas and content. So this idea that our students are wonderful creators of content, and this is seen in studies such as exam writing questions. The sheer manpower of 400 students in 5 different universities writing questions really generates a data bank faster than the 5 of us in a room. I think the idea of flexibility and time is an obvious benefit for all technological interventions, and again with the format, allowing contributions in terms of photography and videography and other native user formats can be rather helpful. I won't go through, of course, the qualitative data analysis you might do on, in terms of the material you get. You could evaluate it in a sort of fairly formal qualitative evaluation way, in a grounded theory framework, reading through lines of text or material code by code, using qualitative analysis software and referring to the guidelines. But that is something that you may undertake in a sort of research-orientated way of your contributions. Similarly, with the quantitative data you may get, for example, you may get voting, you may get numbers and figures. Typically, crowdsourcing is not used in a questionnaire survey type of format or in a hypothesis-proving form of powered study. But what you might see, for example, are the establishment of salient and important points, and just the recognition of these outliers, whether or not they're significant. So that's the sort of theoretical front. So rather than having formal quantitative and qualitative analysis, what we often consider is actually a practical analysis. And we look at these kind of quadrants. Does it confirm our hypothesis? We put it out there. Are our participants, potential participants, agreeing with us? Are they identifying with us issues in implementation? Are they uncovering new information that we haven't previously seen? And are they making some suggestions for tweaks and improvements? So this is the sort of practical analysis. That all sounds very theoretical, so I'd like to sort of concretize it with an example of how we've really used it in medical education. And this was, slightly embarrassingly, I think, a slightly old project, which is anatomical henna, so henna tattoos on the body for our medical student education. Just to introduce the idea, the idea of using henna tattoos is not totally bizarre. Actually, as a subject, we're a rather three-dimensional subject. I think in the literature, things like body painting are rather well supported. But in terms of issues from the creator perspective, 2 major issues. I have not an artistic molecule in my body, so obviously I couldn't really contribute to the content, and also as a new educator in the department, no awareness whatsoever of what were the specific local learning issues to our population. These are 2 very significant issues. So to get around these 2 issues, we adopted a crowdsourcing approach, both mixed and digital and in person. And I'd like to draw your attention to our 2 types of questions. So we wanted small contributions from individuals about their learning methods in 2 formats. One of which was about the format itself, and this question really invited a lot of wonderful contributions. Show us how you learned the anatomy of the forearm. And by show us, we got these wonderful contributions. Some of them was just a few lines. Some of them were for website links, videos, diagrams, little images. And really, that was a wonderful way to get some of the content. And also in terms of framing what we were going to cover, what areas are you having difficulty in learning the anatomy of the forearm? So to direct our attention to specific learning issues. So both giving us what we're going to use and also directing us to the areas that need addressing. And we did this via social media in terms of Facebook posts, campaigns, and we received these photos, videos, drawings, bizarrely were sent in as well. And we also had some invited workshops. And whilst it was originally a Hong Kong U medical student project, we ended up with contributions from health sciences and professional students from all walks of life, which I thought was rather nice. This is what it looked like, and I'm just going to go to the magnifying glass here. So you can see some of the images that people would send. So we had these sort of small representative diagrams that we sort of workshopped here, and they were converted into these sort of tattoo-like images. And I'd like to show you the final product. So this is what they look like. Looks like just a sort of fairly normal tattoo, I'm sure you'd agree, but actually each of these tattoos contains a tremendous amount of anatomical information, and the students could examine them and look at and reinforce and explore some of the ideas about the muscles and nerves and structures of each of these sections. So they have the forearm, the posterior anterior forearm, and these are just two examples. I'd like to show you, however, the real impact of crowdsourcing in terms of what the students gave us. Really unexpected. So one of them was this idea of phonetic devices that they use. So there are two rather non-systematic muscles, supinator and anconeus in the forearm, and the students suggested actually the way they remember it is this phonetic device. So they sort of use spank as their way to remember, which is quite strange to me. It wouldn't occur to me, but that's how they do it. Similarly, with this muscle here, the abductor pollicis, they represented this, the Hong Kong students did, as a UFO, so being abducted by an alien. Now, of course, as me, as an individual teaching students about muscles, it would never occur to me at all to use this type of imagery within the work. But because they contributed, it allows us to use these type of techniques in our work. Similarly, they use this form of rather bizarre alphanumeric conversion. I don't know if you've seen your students doing this. So they use numbers to represent letters, or letters represent numbers. And so they ended up writing these words that represent series of numbers. Again, if you look in the literature, there's not that much on this. But if you look at how the students use it, I'd like to highlight your attention to here. So this is SISI here, and actually it represents 5121, which is a way of imagining the numbers of muscles in each layer of the forearm. Now, why that's particularly important is what they're doing in this nice old classic pedagogy is they're going from the idea of unconscious incompetence. I have no idea how many muscles are in the forearm. And through this numerical process of conversion, they're going to this conscious incompetence. I know there's 5121, I just don't know what they are. And this is a process that we learned the students were doing through this crowdsourcing. The last one, just to focus on here, again, is this idea of the visuospatial pattern. So one of the muscles in the arm, the triceps, they represent as 3 heads. And the length of hair on each of the heads here actually represents the length of the head of the muscle, and its various attachments to the glenoid tubercle, which is one of the bones there. And again, these are things that do not occur to me as a tutor, but certainly very useful and really useful to show the other students as well. So I'll sort of finish off there really, just to show you that example. I do hope that when we're looking at technology in education, we're not just looking at implementation and beyond, but we're looking at ideation, we're looking at creation, and we're looking at contributing ideas, and really involving the students actively in the development phase. I think we can look at digital and real world needs ourselves. And I think one thing to sort of end on is to say, we do need to protect our participants as we always do with these, and just because it's convenient doesn't mean we shouldn't look out for them. So things like IRB and ethical approval and informed consent form a very important part. But hopefully it gives us some extra food for thought. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. C. Next speaker is Dr. Jian, also from the same department as the lecturer in this in anatomy also. So we have a lot of anatomists today.
Right. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you very much for you guys to say wait for now. Thank you very much for my colleagues to present us such a dynamic range of in terms of development in the pedagogies and education. And I'm here. I'm honored to be invited here to give this little presentation because we are honored to be part of this UGC project, TNL project, led by Friedman here. So we actually have this great opportunity to collaborate with PolyU and also with Wilton's team of the School of EE in our own university. We have this opportunity to actually combine all the forces together to make this happen. So with this one, it's a pretty down-to-earth, everyday problem that we made in our anatomical teaching in our school. So which basically is we teach cadaveric-based anatomy. This means all these type of teaching involving in dissections of real anatomy. As well as not spoilers warning, just a word of warning, because we'll be showing some of the real cadaver images or videos. If you can't take it, I advise you that just close your eyes. Because it's dissection anyway. So basically, here it's just showing that we just have the news that the government and our faculties agreed to take more students. So we already have 240, around 240 students this year. So we're agreed to take 25 more, 25 more from September. So this pressure for every teacher will be even higher. We currently provide 29 cadavers because we don't have 29 dissecting tables, but this is actually decided by the size of the room that we have in our school, our faculty. Space is the most valuable resources in Hong Kong, I guess. So we have this big lab that enough for 29 dissection tables with cutting-edge technologies, which all the ventilations and then the surgical lamps and the cameras and everything. But we can only provide 29 tables, so that means we can only provide 29 cadavers per room. And then we have 240 students as of this year. So what we do is with this cadaveric dissection sessions, which we still think is so very essential for any medical teaching, any graduate program. The current trend is trying to gradually replace the reality to virtual reality. But I disagree in this specific area for anatomy, for you to get this textile memory and all this procedural memory, virtual reality will never be as good as reality. You have to feel it. You have to do it yourself before you make mistakes on really real human, live human. So we call this cadaver as free body teacher. They are able to teach the students even after they pass away. So we refer them as free body teachers. So when it comes up later, that is cadaver. But still, we insist on doing cadaveric dissection sessions. This is vitally important in combining with our body donation system. We have a similar program in our fellow university, Cecot. They all always. So it's great that Hong Kong population are so open about this, and then they are so lovely people. They donate their bodies. Now we have sufficient amount of body to our Hong Kong U dissection gross anatomy teaching every year. So we have in fact we have more than we can handle, the people who's wanting to donate online. So we have this, so the body parts, the great body teachers part is covered. And the space part, we do what we can do. The other thing is the forces, the teaching forces that we can deploy in this dissection sessions are actually quite limited. Because our school, we have dedicated anatomical teachers, me, Dr. Chen, we have Chris and Tom. They're all really good anatomists, and we have several other senior anatomists, but that's about it. With each dissection session, we have lots of dissection sessions. We need to deploy 6 teachers, looking after almost 300 students, constantly answering questions, doing the demonstrations, doing dissections, and going around tables. It is quite a exhausting job to do. And from my own experience, we wear these protective gowns, and each dissection session after that, I have a very bad back pain, and all my gowns are drenched with sweat. So it's basically just dripping down. It's very, very tiring, and it's really hard to. All the students will queue behind me saying that Dr. Jian, we are the next. You come to our table next. We sometimes have 5 tables queuing, so it's really, you lost track. We're running around, and the student didn't really get enough instruction. So how to solve this, and how to jump out of the circle where students just receiving instructional type of teaching, this sort of not deep level of learning, but rather than lower level of thinking and learning. So this is why we have this good opportunity to work together with Wilton and with this TEAL project, where we, with help with our collaborators, we are able to develop this system where hopefully can help us to elevate the stress that put on each teachers and also promote deep learning for our students in the dissection lab. So basically, these are disadvantages I just described where, as you can see here, this is the dissection lab that we are using. It's a very long lab. The reason why is in mainland China, some of the universities, they have much more students. What they do for dissection is they divide them into small classes, 30 students, one class. So they have two cadavers or great body teachers there. They repeat the same class for 10 times. The disadvantage of that is you can only see that two body. The variations and pathologies that displays on each body is quite limited. With this one, each student can share the resources of 29 different bodies. Each one of them has specific anatomical trait and specific pathological. So all these bodies, when they come, most of them have pathological conditions before they pass away. So you can see different types of surgical marks or even surgical interventions within different sets of organs. So this is very important, and then students can mingle and then can talk to each other, can share, can communicate with each other. And the students are genetically grouped already to each table. So they are actually grouped. So this actually gives us already a base for group learning. So team-based learning already because they need to work within a group with one body. So how to actually link each group and make the advantage, amplify the advantage. This is where our system, we call DPSS, basically dissection peer support system, with help of iClass, the brilliant design of iClass, which Fridley and Wilton introduced this morning. Because there's some of the limitations for iClass for normal platform, we sort of have the back door and ask Wilton to open the door, and then now we have a tailor-made iClass platform for our dissection system. Basically, in terms of advantage we have, we can upload high-definition, very big, large files in a very fast speed to their server, and then can display them, and then we have some tailor-made features for us. So with that platform in place, what we do is the students, we give them according to the features of that given class, the important features and the clinical relevance of that given task. We have several pre-set tasks or things that's a problem the student need to solve together. As Tom explained, Dr. Thomas Cecot explained, we try to make students involved rather than being taught. So they create their own learning components. With this one, students need to solve these puzzles via discussion within the groups with the guidance of the teachers, and how to output sort of these type of achievement or the results. We deploy this task, and then the student use the tablet, the technology enrich or reinforce or enable hardware to film a structured short video with commentary that explaining the key features and how they did this. And then they upload it to the iClass platform with the high definition, with very short. And then in this platform, they upload these videos by groups. So we have 29 tables, so we have 29 groups. So each group, when they solve one task, they upload one video to the platform. And all 29 groups, all the students can watch that video, that key features that shorted by one group. And all the students are able to discuss this, to rate it, and of course to watch it and then to actually learn from it, the key features. Sometimes some groups have very interesting anatomical features, or some groups dissect one structure brilliantly, and they will explain in that video, and the student can watch that, they can learn from each other, they can give comments, again, they can rate the video, and of course, our teacher, we can input comments as well to double to reinforce what was done right and to bridge the knowledge gap. So the advantage is that the student can actually generate learning materials, generate questions, and they can answer their own questions. This sort of peer teaching, peer assessment, and altogether we put together it's called peer support. So both peer teaching and peer assessment.
Can we actually also call it crowdsourcing?
Crowdsourcing, yeah. But our quad is like 240 students, so it's not like but still, I think all these concepts are actually linked together. Basically using not just yourself, the teacher's ability, but actually harnessing the collective intellect to actually improve our teaching experience. Improve the efficiency, and then the teacher can actually know in terms of different groups what are their anatomical knowledge level, so you can engage the student much better. Than when you actually answering the question, you're not just giving them random comments. You're actually targeting specifically to their level of knowledge. So this is this is ICAS interface. So if you guys going to use ICAS later, this is what it shows. So basically here we have the different classes. One classroom is one dissection lab. So for example, if you're going to that one dissection lab, when you click it in, we have a list of video tasks. These are designed specifically to cater the need of that class. And the student can read the instructions, and when they click in each task, this will be the description of the task, what they need to do, and they can use the tablet. They can use the generic software, the technology enhanced or enriched software to actually film what we need them to do to solve the puzzle as a video task. So then they will upload it here. So this is a test run where we only have 6 groups, but then when we deploy this system, there will be 29, probably will be 29 group of videos. This is just one session, one task. And when the student upload it, and everybody can watch this, and then everybody can make a comment and can rate this and can learn from it. Each part, each cadaver group body teacher is different, so they can see that in real life, it's not just look like the textbook. It's the variation is so vast that they will have the concept of it's more close to the clinical scenario, more close to a real life scenario rather than just within the classroom. Okay, so this is just several tasks. So here we have some examples. Just to, I think I have just 1 minute. I'll just show several examples that I've already done. So here I already downloaded. Here. So there's no sound, but there, if you can hear sound, then there will be commentary from the students. And this is the task. This is a task where you want the student to find describe different boundaries of different spaces or foldings of your pleural cavity. By this means student can know better how the lung sits in the chest, and then in terms of dangerous triangles, or if you need to do an incision into the thoracic region, which is the best place to make it to stick your knife, basically. So this is a very short video. Students just explain what are the spaces. And this is a sort of a starter case of task. This task is let the student to actually identify the vagus nerve, and also where the vagus nerve turns to become the recurrent laryngeal nerve at the aortic arch. And this is quite important. We have several quite important structure in terms here, really close to the mediastinum. And sometimes students really easily to mix the phrenic nerve and vagus nerve. By this means, the student can actually find this nerve and explain how they dissect this nerve. That's what they're doing now. And then how they find the vagus nerve at this position here. And then they do that. And then we can see that the student, I think I have a picture where the student, I'll just give another example here. This is the student explaining the height of the lung. It's very important if you want to do lung surgery, especially like removing the lung, you need to know the positions of where are the bronchus, where are the big arteries, nerves, and veins in terms of in the hilum below. And then the lymph nodes there at the position where usually if there's a cancer, metastatic cancer or a tumor there, which are the groups of the lymph nodes that you need to pay severe attention to. And this is where we're letting the students actually explain this with their own separate specimen. These lungs are freshly dissected, so they just cut it off take it out from the body, and then they can use the fresh membrane. They can actually match this hilum together with the hilum next at the root of the lung still remain in the main trunk. So by this means they understand this much better. And it actually saves us a lot of work where we go to each stations and to explain to them what are these. Students are very motivated from the preliminary data and then the comments of the students. They're eager to participate. But the long-term effect or the quantitative data will remain to be seen as we're going to deploy the system in the coming semester. So thank you very much. This is my sharing today.
Okay, so thank you all the speakers. I guess we can afford some 5 minutes of Q&A session. First, can we do that? I know that they say we are running a bit over time.
10 minutes.
10 minutes even? Oh, okay, so that would be great. So as previously suggested, should we go and do a plenary session like this? Yeah, okay, so may I invite the speakers? Stand in the front. Okay, so yeah, that would be great. So may I ask, is there any question for our speakers?
I have one in, so just beginning with Jian and Helen.
Oh, sorry. I remember in one of our conversations, I heard that this video peer support system has not been done seemingly anywhere else in the world. Why do you think that's the case? Is it because medical schools can't find the tech support to do that? Or is it just a completely new thing?
As far as I know, I don't think I've heard of anything like that. As to why we came up with this idea, frankly, I have no idea how we came up with it.
Yeah. We're sort of just sitting in the office brainstorming, and because we got an invitation from you, and thinking of how, because in fact, the hardware is actually not for this. We actually designed this hardware for another project. But then, since we got this hardware, the tablet computers and all these installed, and we have the collaboration with you guys, this is, I think, the brainchild of this, everything that come together. Where this is such a good idea, we just use this and make it reality.
I think that now that I think back about it, I think at that time we were facing the problem of having a increasingly large cohort of students, and that we don't have enough anatomy teachers, and also we just installed a set of very expensive tablets, though they are small, but they are very good tablets with very good cameras, and we are trying to make full use of these tablets. Initially, we were just thinking about using the tablets for displaying video, and we tried to make bidirectional flow of information between the teachers and students, instead of just teachers giving out information to students. We want that there is a flow of information, not just back from the student to the teachers, but also among the students. And then we suddenly, with a spark in the brain, then we thought of this idea. As I know, I don't think I've heard of anything like that. Chris and Tom, have you seen things the peer support system of dissection.
Because we have a quite specific journal in our field, anatomical education. Yeah. If there's nothing in ASE, then probably because they are the most cutting edge. So yeah, I think it's pretty new.
The other thing is that we try to make these turn these into products of scholarship. Whenever we have the opportunity, we would formalize our trial, our experience, to make it into publishable, papers.
One more, maybe two.
Yeah, one more,
really
and
fast.
then the next. Yeah.
So Julie, what kind of students are from education? EduHK. Like, are they? They're not med students, of course.
No, they're
So what-
final year teaching students. Usually
Oh.
teachers of English. They're specializing in teaching English. So
Oh.
yeah. So they're heading off on their field experience, often overseas, and they are embedded there for I think a couple of months before they come back. Yes.
One more question, just really fast. Or Chris, what was the app you made that failed? I'm not saying fail, but
It
that
was
you were
a
not happy.
terrible and ugly but well-conceived app called Wellnuts for wellness. Sort of a terrible pun. I wasn't originally in charge, but I was part of the team, and it was designed to give sort of at-home testing information. So you'd follow an algorithm, and you'd find out what STD you might have, and monitored your various naughty activities over time. And it was a nice idea, great public health background, but not very popular.
STD is for sexually transmitted disease.
Sexually transmitted disease, I should say, yes.
Okay, I can just ask my question without the microphone. For Chris, when you guys are doing crowdsourcing, do you ever do it in the classroom? Because I teach with a Google form, and I will have my students curate examples that are relevant to them and their situation. And have you ever done that in the classroom? And have you done any split testing, where if you have two popular videos, you have the students describe them and see best, which group has the most rich or most valuable descriptions? Have you guys done anything like that?
Well, thank you for the question. I think in terms of live action testing, we do tend to use these sort of measurement type devices meant to be getting contributions from the classroom, although not, I must say, not formally contributing to products. So in terms of the creation and things that we might actually put into teaching products, we haven't really done that in that way. I think in terms of the comparison, it's a great idea. I think that we've seen this done sometimes in terms of upvoting and downvoting, that sort of Reddit style of sort of, not popularity, but sort of people voting. And again, not something that we've done live in classrooms, I must say. I think it's a very nice idea. I think in terms of the other crowdsourcing projects I've looked at and done, it tends to be over time a little bit. So the time element and the iteration of the idea, so we can see patterns emerging over time. Whereas I see a classroom as quite an instrumented scenario. Very useful, but also it's a sort of point instrumentation. But perhaps over a course or a series of courses could be very, very valuable information.
Sections, differences in sections, differences. Because one thing that really clicked with me is I would teach communication. Nobody is in a communication class for communications. You have engineers, you have psychology students, but I would have them curate based on their interests. And that gave me a much more rich database of examples to use in the future. Like, I never thought about using K-pop examples, but like when you're talking about your henna, now I'm using K-pop, then the students all think I'm cool. Well, I have no clue about K-pop, but it was just getting their ideas and how they would apply it. It was just the most valuable thing for me as a teacher I'd ever done. So I really like that. And
Thank you. And I think this idea is they create much better things than we do. I think this is the honest answer. I feel myself becoming less and less interesting relative to my students. I think they're fantastic. And I think that's great. It's great. Once we realize that, we are hungry and we're sort of getting as much as we can. I certainly admire what you're doing too. Fantastic.
May I ask any more questions? Yeah.
Just sort of briefly for all of you,
Thank you very much for such good presentations. It's great to know what HKU is doing. But just very quickly, and I'm sorry, maybe this is not as applicable a question to you, Julie, because you're just starting out, but
as we know in active learning, and just like from what you were just talking about, feedback is always very important. So what kind of feedback have you been getting or incorporated into your platform so far?
So I think one of the common theme for all of us is that actually there is a peer feedback. This is something very, very powerful, and you can see that it's a trend right now that the peer feedback could be really, really powerful. And whenever we are doing, actually, we are using this peer feedback. We also are using mentors. We're naming not the teachers, but the mentors, someone to support you, just to give you some ideas. But I think this is a great example, actually, of the feedback to the people, the students.
I think perhaps maybe I can add a little bit about in the interprofessional team-based learning, in which you have 6 or 7 teachers supervising 400 students. We are also engaging the students, the team members, to give the other students feedback, like the peer assessment. That's one form of feedback. And you can also see in the video support, peer support system of dissection, students can actually rate the video produced by other students. So that's another form of popularity vote. And surprisingly, many of those videos are actually very, very good. They're very focused because we limit the amount of the time, the length of the video that they can produce. Maybe Yang Jian, you can supplement this.
Yes, it's just, by the way, because we're all the mentors who are connected. So you good. So in that one, the peer feedbacks is one very important thing. Because I think in all our presentation, peer feedback is one element. So now it's sort of like a necessity, where one student knows where they're in the position of their own peers, then they reflect on themselves. So this is very good. With our peer review system, students at the beginning they just all rate everything 5, so it's just fun. But then I think given time, they will actually see which one is more useful, and they really do want to. Because medical students, they're quite competitive. If you give them a group task, they really most of them want to be really competing for the best presentation. I think for that, when they take it seriously, they really actually stimulate their creativity, and actually they do peer review quite seriously. Not just with this project, with other projects like the PBLs or other that are involving in peer review, peer assessment. You can see the students actually taking it seriously. One thing that I hate the most is the free rider, right? So I think we all encounter when we do group-based, team-based learning. I think with our case, TBL, there's like student rating each other like system where this is actually one thing that can learn from that.
And just to try to be a bit different, I think in terms of feedback, that's often within the classroom. I think 2 experiences I've had with feedback in terms of outside and dissemination. One of them, a student wrote to me and says, your anatomical project Helen project is very interesting. What's the hashtag that you're using? Which I think is very modern. So my understanding is it's sort of a code people use on various social media that allows it to disseminate. And that was very useful because this is how we turn from MBBS only to having other health professions come in and contribute. And in another project they did, which was a gamification project using escape room, those sort of escape room games to teach. Again, this was disseminated through social media, and I had students from the other university, CUHK, come across the pond into my class, unbeknownst to me, because it'd been spread in this way. So I think that's one form of feedback, is this idea that it bridges a little bit our boundaries of individual classroom, and you do get contributors from outside, which is unexpected and quite welcome, I would say.
But there's one thing, well, I'm aware of the time, but one thing that some of you may be thinking about is about the peer support system of dissection. And you may wonder, I mean, videotaping dissected cadavers, is it going to be really sensitive materials? I mean, especially in medicine, many of the materials that we are dealing with in classes, they are such sensitive and private issues of other people. And we do pay a lot of attention to secure that nobody's right, nobody's privacy are violated in this process. So there's an additional dimension that perhaps we should have spent a little bit more time to talk about, but that's definitely in our mind when we are working on these issues.
That's another reason why we sort of currently kind of reluctant to make it a MOOC, because when you make a massive online course, these sensitive materials, it's not very, it's quite sensitive because it's really not appropriate to distribute it through the internet. So currently what we are doing is, although we have the iClass, all these resources actually at the in-house server. Basically everything, all the videos is actually stored within our proximity, and then students, unless they come to the practical, they can't really see them. So this is another thing to motivate them to come actually to the practical rather than doing it online, because this is the thing, they can only do it in the practical rather than off the classroom. So it's another dimension to this.
So, Jian, does it mean that, let's say, the students cannot own a copy of the video?
No. And then we're not distributing this video, so there's no copyright problem. Then of course we will ask the student to actually sign the consent form when this whole project will. But they are not to be distributed. They're not like to be taken away. These videos are all within. We're thinking of putting a revise station or information station in the library where students within the revision period they can go and tap into all these videos to revise. But they still can't really physically taking the video away, or they cannot link this video from off the campus or off the medical lab.
Yeah, I ask that is because many of my students, they like to have the sources, right? They say the year 2 and year 3 students will pass their materials to the year 1, and then if they look at that and they submit the same video, then
all the videos are actually doing it live online because they can't really, because they need to use, they're not using their phones, they're not allowed to use their phones. And to be frank, it's when you're doing dissection, you don't want to use your own phone. So all the tablets are actually provided and stations, like on the station, on each dissection table, they do it live, like real time. And they upload in real time. So yeah, they are not going to be used old videos. We'll have more and more videos because they do it real time.
And do you make the corrections for them? Let's say because the narration may be wrong.
Yeah, we will actually check all the, like we're not checking all the videos per se, but all the students will watch that video and they will ask questions. We'll go through those comments and then we have teachers, 6 teachers, where we'll have a look and then we'll make corrections, filling the, as we say, filling the omission or filling the gap of knowledge and giving them guidance through the comments, through the peer feedback or through the teacher to student feedback.
Okay, thank you very much. Any more questions? No? And without further ado, let's say I think we should move on to the next session. But before that, we should thank all the speakers today and thank you for the participation.